For most of recorded history, restraining a person considered dangerously insane meant iron. Manacles bolted to stone walls, ankle chains, restraint chairs fitted with iron collars. At Bedlam Hospital in London, the asylum so notorious it gave the English language the word Bedlam, patients were chained to the floor of their cells for years at a stretch, and for a small entrance fee, the public could walk through the wards and watch them, the way you'd visit a menagerie. It was, for a while, one of London's more popular tourist attractions. Chains didn't just immobilize a person. They cut into skin, caused infections, froze joints, and left people unable to so much as lie down comfortably. For roughly 200 years, across most of Europe, this was simply what psychiatric care looked like. Then, in 1790, at the Bicêtre Hospital just outside Paris, an attendant named Guillaume Ferrus tried something different. He took heavy canvas duck cloth, the same tough fabric used for sailcloth and tents, and sewed it into a jacket with sleeves several feet too long enough to wrap fully around a patient's torso and tie behind the back, pinning the arms without a single link of metal. He called it the camisole de force, the jacket of force. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Ferrus was working in the very same institution, in the very same decade, where the physician Philippe Pinel became famous for striking the chains off patients at the Bicêtre and the neighboring Salpêtrière, arguing publicly that the mentally ill were sick, not criminal, and deserved treatment rather than punishment. The straitjacket was a direct product of that reform wave. Canvas instead of iron was at the time a genuine act of progress. Restraint that could be applied and removed in seconds, that didn't rust, chafe, or require a blacksmith. It spread fast, and it evolved as it traveled. The French pattern tied at the back, a common English variant laced up the front instead, with a separate crotch strap so a patient couldn't simply step out of it. Some versions added leather wrist cuffs sewn into the sleeve ends for extra security. Within a few decades, asylums across Europe and then the United States, from the Eastern State Hospital in Virginia to New York's asylums, had adopted some version of it as standard equipment. In England, the reformer Guillaume Tuke had already opened the York Retreat in 1796 on an even more radical premise than Ferrus's, that patients could often be managed with no mechanical restraint whatsoever, through routine, quiet surroundings, and basic dignity. The straitjacket sat uneasily between these two impulses, marketed everywhere as the humane alternative to chains, while institutions that never fully embraced Tuke's model leaned on it as a cheap, fast way to keep control of increasingly overcrowded wards. And overcrowded wards are exactly where its reputation curdled. By the late 1800s, asylums across the industrialized world were taking in far more patients than they were built for, understaffed, underfunded, and under almost no outside oversight. Restraint stopped being a last resort and became routine. In 1887, the American journalist Nellie Bly got herself committed to the Women's Lunatic Asylum on Blackwell's Island in New York by feigning insanity, and spent 10 days documenting conditions from the inside. Patients tied for hours over trivial infractions, ice-cold baths, spoiled food, sane women left undiagnosed for weeks. Her exposé, published as 10 Days in a Madhouse, became a sensation and forced real reforms to how asylums were inspected and funded. It was one of several such scandals across the era. Decades earlier, Elizabeth Packard had launched her own public campaign after being involuntarily committed by her husband, helping push several U.S. states toward due process protections for psychiatric commitment. The straitjacket, invented as an act of mercy, had become in the public imagination, the single clearest symbol of everything wrong with institutional psychiatry. Its eventual medical decline came from chemistry, not conscience. In the early 1950s, French researchers developed chlorpromazine, marketed in the United States as Thorazine, the first drug that could reliably calm acute psychiatric symptoms without physically restraining anyone at all. Combined with a broader deinstitutionalization movement that emptied out the old asylums through the 1960s and 70s, mechanical restraint went from standard practice to a tightly regulated last resort. In most modern facilities, it means soft fabric limb restraints applied for minutes, under strict documentation rules, not a full-body canvas jacket left on for hours, which freed the straitjacket up for an entirely second life, as spectacle rather than medicine. Starting around 1915, the escape artist Harry Houdini turned the very object built to make escape impossible into his signature act, having himself strapped into one by police officers or hospital staff on stage, then hoisted upside down by his ankles from a crane, a rooftop, or a theater marquee, wriggling free in front of crowds of thousands while a clock ran. It was the same basic design Ferrus had sewn in 1790, repurposed to prove the opposite point, that confinement, however total it looked, could be broken. Magicians still perform versions of the escape today. That image, not the asylum ward, but the upside-down escape, is the one that ended up sticking. Would you have called Ferrus's invention progress? Follow for the next object.